We're glad that you're able to join us for our series called Inspire and Innovate. I'll be a host and moderator today. My name is Uzair Rashid. I am a director of innovation at a large pair where we're sort of focused on generating both incremental and around the bend innovations that are meant to delight and inspire our members and our customers. Prior to my current role, I was heading innovation and strategy at CVS Health, where I was doing things like reimagining care delivery, focused on post-merger integrations, in addition to just corporate strategy work. Prior to that, I've been a lifetime consultant, and a lot of the work that I'm doing today is scanning and scouring the market amidst the pandemic or this looming upper respiratory illness that's sort of plaguing all of us. And it's, one of the astounding facts that have come to mind is unemployment rates. And if I look at Massachusetts specifically, in February, the unemployment rate was at about 100,000 or so folks. Today, after March, unemployment is about 1.2 million people. That's a 1,200% increase post-COVID. To add to that, these type of things are disproportionately affecting historically disenfranchised and minority groups like our community. And so, this webinar series was born to promote engagement with our community around building resiliency, around remarketing ourselves amidst the pandemic, and helping those that want to engage and sort of pick up on tips and tricks on how they might be able to reinvent themselves in their career. And so we have sort of a world-class panel on board with us today to touch on the topics that I've just mentioned. And I'll pause for a moment, and I'm humbled to call some of the folks on the panel my dear friends, and some I've just got to know, and we're growing a friendship, and I'm completely excited about that as well. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to our panel for introductions, starting with Vicar.
Love it. Going first. No standards to set. There. Thank you very much for having me on the panel. Appreciate the invite. ISGH, really appreciate you putting this on. It's definitely needed. A lot of folks are looking to, your leadership to promote what we need to do, and really appreciate you putting out a forecast for the community and giving help. I'm an attorney by training. I have dabbled on the entrepreneurship side and biotech side, and I'm currently working for LivaNova on their investment team, and specialize in early stage technology, and looking forward to giving advice. And I am humbled to give advice, and I try to give advice to myself first, and if anything that I can say helps someone out, I'm happy to help anybody that's there.
Great, thank you, Vicar. We'll move on to Adam Kafif.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. Very honored to be here and share a little bit with you. My name is Adam. I'm 26. Growing up, I was surrounded by entrepreneurship. My mom is Italian, my father is Moroccan, and they came together and started a bakery that I saw blossom, and they did all the marketing and all of the production. So I really learned the ins and outs of business, and it inspired me to want to always work for myself. When I was 15, I sold my video games and taught myself how to screen print t-shirts and hoodies. And I combined my skills and my passions with things that were really important to me. And on my hoodies and all of my graphic designs, I was speaking on important messages from a high schooler's perspective, and we would donate 50% of the profit to an organization that the customer chooses. And so I was really big on the experience and the customer experience, and really making people feel valued. And of course, infusing your own values with an industry that doesn't necessarily see that every day. And I continued that till today. And I'm also a talent manager and strategist for a journalist. Her name is Noor Tagori. She's a journalist in culture and works with brands and consulting and documentaries and podcasts. So a lot of our work focuses on infusing our identity and our values and bringing that to industries and really just culture that hasn't really seen a lot of that yet. And a lot of representation in media is our focus. So thank you again for having me. Hope I can share a little bit from my experience there.
Thank you, Adam. And Shayna.
Hi, assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Shaina. I'm 20. I'm a senior at the University of Pennsylvania and the co-founder and chief marketing officer of Juve Consulting, which is a Generation Z marketing agency where we work with Fortune 500 companies, brands, and nonprofits and startups to tell them how to authentically engage with Generation Z. I am not going to act like I have a robust knowledge given my age, but I do have some specific experiences, and with my personal background in advocacy for the Muslim and Asian American community, I serve as the United States of Women Ambassador for Pennsylvania, focusing on creating access in economic development for women in Pakistan, as well as being involved with the Asian community within Philadelphia. So I'm very, very excited to be here, to learn from everyone who's here, thankful to ISGH and everyone behind the scenes for making this happen, and to get started and jump right into the conversation.
Thank you, Shaina. And Anas.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Anas Ghazi. I am the Chief Strategy Officer of Stagwell Group, which is a digital-first marketing and communications group. And as of this year, we are the 23rd largest marketing and communications group, as according to Ad Age. Prior to that, I was CEO of WPP's Data Alliance and also Chief Growth Officer over at Kantar. Did about 8 years in financial services. And prior to that, I've been an actor, a teacher, and I'm just thrilled to be here in particular with the next voice, with the Gen Z generation, with Shaina and Adam, and also with Vikar and Naman. And I think, Rosario, what you're doing, bringing together the Muslim community to inspire and to give leadership is incredible. So kudos to you.
Thank you, Anas. And Naman, I might start by saying, please don't text and drive.
You're on mute, Naman.
You're on mute, Naman. So I think we may have run into a technical difficulty.
Oh no.
And we'll come back to Naman's introduction and sort of get started here. And when we think about COVID, it sort of hit nationally and internationally, and it kind of came by surprise in a lot of ways, right? People saw how it affected China and then Italy, and then slowly creeped into the US, and it immediately began to affect operations for companies. It began to affect healthcare organizations on the payer side, specifically in terms of cost of care. And if we think about folks that are going through a turbulent time right now in their career or in their industry, and folks that are looking for a new gig, Anas, you sort of resonate and come to mind in someone that started a brand new position amidst a pandemic.
Right.
So, there's two parts to the question that I really want to ask. The first is, how did you go about finding a new gig in a seemingly very difficult market? And how are you now navigating joining an organization amidst a pandemic and a recession?
So that's a great question. And I think to be very truthful, I joined Stagwell last year in December. So it was just before the pandemic hit, but the creeping up was happening. And it was interesting because the role as Chief Strategy Officer is to drive growth for the firm. Ultimately, we are a challenger brand in the marketing and communications world. So I had this full-on 90-day plan of these are the templated activities I'm going to do to drive growth. So and truthfully, even though I started in December, I was on holiday for 2 weeks and then came back in January. So within 6 weeks of being on the job, everything went on to shut down. So anything I had planned, any of that logistical or that tribal knowledge I had went out the window, because no one had experienced, or no one has experienced, a pandemic in our lifetime. So it's all new. So I can't say that I had a strategy in play, to be honest. What I can say, it was more around try everything, because there is no silver bullet to drive growth. especially in an environment like this. So we had the pandemic, then we had the social unrest that was precipitated by George Floyd's killing, then we had the economic volatility. So my advice, or what we did as a firm, and alhamdulillah, the firm has actually grown in this time, 3x, if you will, is we focused on marketing, we focused on product innovation, we focused on what do our clients need from us now. So it was this idea of being human first rather than sell. It was to serve our client base. And in serving, you've got to do it in different ways. You've got to meet the clients where they're at. So it was hosting podcasts, creating content. And I know Adam and I have had a lot of these conversations. It was continually create content, get yourself out there, put yourself first, use LinkedIn, use social media channels. And then on that, it was really gaining, for us, we had to gain industry recognition, because as a challenger brand, coming from the #1 shop to coming to the #3 shop or #23 shop, no one knew us. So it was, how do we just get to know our clients and the landscape in a way where we can connect in a meaningful manner. So these types of growth roles are really tough, especially when we at one point in time had almost 40 million unemployed. It was just getting out there. I think that's the salient piece, and it's do everything to get out there. Create content, speak, share your thoughts. Even if you think your thoughts aren't going to be helpful, they will help someone. So you've always got to be top of mind in front of your client base, in front of your audience, in front of the industry, so that they can continue to relate to you. And I would also say for us, it was about telling our stories as a diverse marketing and communications group. So those three pieces is what has made, even though 2020 is still really tough, and there's another segment on growth, and even though we've grown, it has been doing a whole bunch of different pieces and doing them well, so that we could deliver growth in a way that was meaningful, purpose-driven, and human.
That's compelling. It's, what stuck out to me is, there's no template or toolkit necessarily to sort of uncharted terrain.
And anyone who says there is, they're lying, because there isn't. They are straight up lying. See, and I appreciate it. Because there isn't. There just can't be. Who's seen a pandemic unless you're around the time of the Spanish flu? Like, no one has seen this.
Yeah, it's a great point. So a lot of, we haven't seen a pandemic, but certainly this isn't the first recession that we've all lived through. And, and if we think about the recession, can you each sort of speak about your career, the transitions in it, and how you might advise someone in today's environment to grow? And I'll just open the floor up, whoever wants to tackle that.
So I'll continue, and then I'll hand the mic over to Adam. How's that? So Adam, then you'll pick over next. So, in terms of navigating, so I started off very candidly as an actor. And I was the first in the Chicagoland community to do that, and it had a lot of taboo around it. But I also believe no one makes history by following the rules. So I was all right with breaking the rules. So from being an actor, went to grad school, did an undergrad in information systems communications, and then went to grad school, did a graduate degree in information systems. But at that point in time, I was also teaching English to high-risk freshmen from the south side of Chicago, which I loved. And after grad school, I wanted to continue to act full time. So I did that. And then I needed health insurance. And then I actually fell into financial services over at TransUnion. And it wasn't because that's what I wanted to do. It was because my agent was down the street. So I was like, here's TransUnion. They're 2 blocks from David O'Connor Casting. My agent's down the street. That's what I'm going to do. And I actually began as a programmer coding financial models for all the top banks across the US around, what types of credit cards should you solicit? What's the default propensity to buy? And based on that, how do you make your marketing decisions? Did that for about 6.5 years. And then I really wanted to move to New York. And I'm a huge believer of manifestation. So I believe if you think it and you say it, it happens. And was lucky enough to get picked up by American Express. And that's when I moved to New York, led digital transformation for American Express for about 2 years, watched an episode of Mad Men with John Hamm. The episode was when he pitched the idea of the carousel for Kodak. And I was like, I could do that. And then guess what? Long story short, 6 months later, I transitioned over to WPP. And then from WPP, started off as director of partnerships for Data Alliance, which was the data unit. And then within 3 years became CEO, then moved into the role of Kantar, chief growth officer, and then over onto Stagwell Group. But I think the lesson in that is never tell someone you can't, because every time someone has told me I can't, from being an actor, from transitioning from financial services to marketing communication, people always told me I couldn't, or they told me I had to take a step down. I have never taken a step down in my career. It's always been a step up. So don't let the naysayers bring you down. Use that as your motivation to push forward. So that's a little bit about me. And then I guess over to Adam.
Appreciate it. I mean, building off of what Enes said, I think if you're able to and you're in a position to, I think this is the best time. I mean, transparently, this is my first time working in a recession. I was in school in the first one. I know Enes looks like he's 25, but then you list off all the experience. And I'm like, how did you do all that in 25 years? But just navigating this one and, seeing my parents trying to navigate the previous one. If you're able to, I think this is the best time to actually learn a craft, not necessarily with your hands, but if you're a creative, definitely learn what you're doing, learn what you're making. If you're in another space, there's still a craft to that space. There's a craft to everything we're doing. And I know, of course, the younger generation, we grew up, we were born on our phones, on social media. And what we see, obviously, there's this whole conversation around social media. Won't even get into that about what's real, what's not. But what we don't see is the perfection of the craft. And a mentor of Noor, who I work with, basically our mantra is we are going to make sure you are the best at what you do so that no one can ever say no because of your ability. So if they're saying no, it's because of some other reason, but you have to be the best at what you do. And that really includes learning the history, the context of what you're doing, the ins and outs of what you're doing. Because whether you're an employee or a business owner, knowing exactly what you're doing allows you to really navigate the space. And it allows you to really stand up for yourself when someone tries to come in and finesse you or try to cut corners. You know exactly every single in and out of the process. So you have control over what you're working on. And of course, that's not feasible for everyone, especially during this time we're working, we're trying to work, we're trying to find work, but everyone has an interest. And if you have an hour at the end of the day, you don't know exactly what your passion is, your like diehard passion, everyone has an interest. Take an hour to look into that interest in the day and you might find a community that you never knew existed. You might find a friend on a forum somewhere and that could spark something, but allow yourself to be sparked. We're not all working jobs that we love. We're on our way there, hopefully, inshallah, but you have to find a spark, and that spark isn't going to be your career. Like, look up Pokemon cards, look up like whatever you used to do in your childhood, and for real, like it'll take you to other places that only enhances your work. Even if you're in a really strict, straight industry, there's always ways to be creative and infuse your creativity and passion into that space. And I'll pass it off to Shaina. Shaina, sorry.
Yeah, my answer to this is that in 2008, I was 7, I think. But when the first financial crisis happened, or for our generation, we grew up at a time where 9/11, like the financial crisis, this political distrust, all of these things have really shaped the way our generation views the role of institutions, the role of individuals, and as it's been alluded to earlier, right? Like if we're living in such polarizing political times, it's been a testament to people actually pausing, and I think for the first time reflecting and kind of thinking about what's the reset mechanism, right? For me, quarantine and COVID-19 has been a cultural, economic, spiritual, mental reset of sorts, and I don't think I've ever reflected this much ever and been alone with my thoughts. But when I have had conversations with other folks, or as a senior, right, I'm leaving school and now full time while I'll still be at Juve. I know a lot of other folks that are recruiting, that are thinking about their own careers, and a lot of it has been reconciling this tension of, okay, so I need to support my family, I need to have a stable financial career, but at the same time, I want to make sure the work that I'm doing creates a net benefit in the world. And I think what's happened with previous generations, or at least in the immigrant experience that I've had with my family, it's been, like sacrifice and martyrdom is something that you think is supposed to be the way the world works, right? If I am not putting in all the effort, and if whatever place I'm in, if I'm not putting in my 100%, but also at the same time recognizing that, like if I am in the place that I am, I should be grateful for it. And I think in that immigrant mentality that at least my parents have had, it's led to the fact that there hasn't been social mobility. Or for me as a first generation low income college student, I knew that going to an elite PWI meant that I'm going to be leaving with some form of privilege. And secondly, hopefully, inshallah, have some, economic clout as well when it comes to a financial stability. So with all of those factors in mind, I think when if I think about the job market, or even my friends that are talking about their experiences while they're choosing their career, it comes down to this point of, is the work that you're doing still creating a net benefit in whatever way it might be? If your goal is to just support your family, to feel like your children are, more secure, given the fact that we are living in this really strange time, if that's your net positive, then that should be enough, right? Like, that's your why, that's what matters to you. And I think for me, it came down to, I don't believe in the philosophy that you should do something in the interim if it does not feel like it's creating a net benefit in the world. And that in some ways does come up of privilege, but as a person of faith, I think my Islamic values have also taught me that if you're doing something for the good of the world, there's no way that God would not allow you to be successful, right? Maybe you're having failures and roadblocks in the way, but in the long term, I don't believe that you would be unsuccessful. Each point would be a different learning for you. So that's something that's really grounded me, even as I think about the uncertainty of the financial market or the recession, which I really can't really comment on because I don't even know how to do my taxes properly. But all of that to say that I think right now what my generation and young folks are thinking a lot about is around the word of impact, and is the work that you're doing creating a net positive, because you never know if a pandemic is going to strike, or if the systemic and institutionalized systems of inequality keep happening, then what is our role to play in that? So I think I'm reconciling the recession and all of those things simultaneously with the political landscape, and with really this human understanding of what people want to see in the world and what's actually happening when it comes to a perception reality of that. I'll leave it on that note, but I'm still hopeful. I don't want to be too negative either. Vakar, would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. No, I want to piggyback off of what you all just said. You couldn't have said it any better. You have to figure out what's happening around your environment, internalize it, and it's not easy. You've got to work hard, right? And I graduated in 2007. That was right at the mark of the recession. And I remember walking in, the first job that I was getting was getting into the tech world with a science background. I had no idea what tech meant, right? So I'm coming straight out of biomedical pharmacology background, and I'm now sitting there as an analyst and looking at phones and what's behind it, the accelerometers, gyroscope. And at the end of the day, it was really interesting to figure out what the hell is going on in the back of the iPhone, right? And the iPhone had just come out. This was iPhone 1 for all those that were there. You just come out and you're sitting there analyzing it, you're trying to figure out how you can utilize it. Android was just coming up. And so figuring out what you're interested in, like you were saying on this Adam, and honing into that skill, many late nights figuring out what that's going on, and then in the daytime you can impact that through whatever job or whatever opportunity is coming. So you've got to find a way to take actions, and it doesn't come easy. You've got to spend some late nights, and it's hard work. I can't sugarcoat it. There's a lot of late nights that go into it, and I'm sure everybody on the panel will say the same. It is a lot of hard work. You have to be getting down, ready to grind, and the grit that comes along with surviving or going through those is what will help you in your next transition. And one more item that I think is critical is the people that are around you. I had the fortune of having the right people around me at the right time. Even if I didn't want them, they were around me, right? Whether you don't like them, they had the best interest for you. I didn't see it at the time. I still don't see the right people that are around me, but they force themselves in your life because they care about you, they love you. And those are the people that you really have to leverage and take advantage of, because they're the ones that are looking out for your best interest. And you got to find a way to internalize that and take action from that.
As I sort of synthesize what everyone said, I've just been taking some notes and some bullets that really stuck out to me. One is this pandemic, the situation that we're in, has really given us an opportunity to pause and reflect. Right? It's also, from Adam, what you were saying is really refine your craft, right? And be really, really exceptionally good at what you do. Anas, what really stuck out to me about what you said is don't give in to the naysayers, because, the detractors are always there, the neutrals are there, and then, the advocates are as well, and focus on the neutrals and the advocates. And also I heard figure out what you're interested in and have good people around you. All of that's resonated really, really deep with me, in addition to do things for the good of the world, right? And, if I draw a parallel in my own career, I've been a lifetime consultant, and, I always bring this conversation up. In having been a consultant, my incentives were always around, how do I fatten up my pockets, and how do I cost save or revenue generate for my customer or client? And it led me to being quite unfulfilled. I'll even say I was sad for some time, right? And there might have been a perspective of, okay, he's doing great, the client list is growing, but at the same time there was this unfulfillment, and that correlated with a conferment ceremony for grad school where they were filling our heads with all of this jargon, and that jargon consisted of, you have the ability to positively change the world, and maybe you even have a responsibility to do so. And so I took that Kool-Aid, I added a bunch of sugar to it, and I just chugged it. And I was like, all right. And having good people around me and being open to opportunity, the world of healthcare sort of presented itself. And it just catapulted forward. And I allowed that impact for, positively impacting healthcare in terms of access, in terms of coordination, in terms of cost transparency, drive me and find a sense of fulfillment. So I would urge everyone, as you're going through a career transition or cogitating against it, to really think through what you're passionate about and where you find impact. I've noticed that Naman has joined the call, and Naman, we'd love to hear a quick intro on you and your background. And then I have a question specifically tailored for you. Just, you might want to hit unmute right there. The unmute is on the bottom left of your screen.
I think you might have.
So while he's figuring that out, Shayna and Adam, you're both incredibly interesting people. Shayna, while being a student, instead of looking for an opportunity, you've created one in being a co-founder of Juve Consulting. Could you speak about Juve and how you started this consulting group, and what advice you might give to those that, may give them a sense of empowerment to start something that new of their own? And Adam, you have a very similar background in starting Listen Up and other compelling brands of your own. And I'd ask you the same question on, what advice you might give to somebody that, they can take it to say, hey, maybe I don't need to look for a career, I can create one.
Yeah, so Juve Consulting kind of just came out of the experiences that we as young people had who first started the company. So it was a group of teens at the time that were like 16, 17, and it was because we were in spaces where we were kind of the tokenized young person, right? So whether it was talking about, let's say, a school board meeting, right, where a bunch of these older folks that were talking about what the school system should change, what should the next policies be, but there was virtually no young people besides maybe one person that was on the side, in the corner, and maybe honestly just taking notes, right? And this happened repetitively to a lot of us, whether it was in the political space, whether it was in advocacy, or just seeing these articles that would talk about young people as disillusioned and as they're always stuck on their phones, that we don't know what they're actually doing, and kind of disenfranchising our generation as if like this dismissive, apathetic cohort of people. But in reality, the truth is that young people are able to advocate for themselves. We have opinions, we do our homework, we do our research, and more so than I think every single generation, right, has pushed the status quo. Whether you look at civil rights, you look at women's rights, and Indigenous folks now advocating from the younger community, and these activists that have this new wave of activism, right, that's come about. And I think that's true for every generation, whether you were a boomer or whether you're a Gen X, Gen Y. It's true that every generation has pushed the status quo. But what's unique about Gen Z is that we have tools and access to implements to a greater extent than any other generation. Mobilization through social media, through our phones, through technology has given us this unique position of being able to create something without much barriers, right? We have this unique ability to facilitate a mass level of change just through the ability of being able to tweet something or by calling out a brand or a company. So with this unique actual action power that we have, Juve Consulting came out of this need of understanding that, don't talk about young people, just talk to us. If we're compelling and if we have opinions, like listen to them. So in our work, what we've got, I think the most exciting part also for us to realize was that older folks are refreshed by conversations with us, whether it's like a 14-year-old literally going in between classes and talking to a massive brand about like what how their packaging needs to change, or how like we don't even care about the product, but we care about your mission, your purpose, and how can we use value-based marketing to really hone in on what we value as a purpose-driven company. And I'll underscore that with, though, like I think to Akar's earlier point about people, right? We've all had mentors. We've all had folks that were able to support us and also give us some direction, because when you're first starting a venture or when you're first contemplating how to create something, it's really confusing and really difficult, right? Whether you're Googling what's an LLC versus an incorporated nonprofit, or what's the legal jargon of something, how do I do my taxes? How do I figure out what the partnership is? How do you actually create a scope of work? How do you price something? All of these questions were ones that we had to navigate ourselves, but we still did have some semblance of a support network that made it possible. And I think the other part of it is being able to do iterations of your own company and your own brand. And what I mean by that is that, when it came to understanding Juve, we've gone through like multiple like logo iterations, and we thought about like changing the name, and we thought about even the people that were on our team, and we made a really asserted effort to make sure that we don't act as Gen Z experts, right? In order to make any statement about our generation, we believe it's best when you have a group of diverse young folks that can give you different perspectives, because there are so many more interesting people that I know that work at Juve that are just my friends in general that have such compelling things to say. And to be able to create something substantive, it's important to make sure that people who are from those communities and represent those point of views and perspectives are there. So I think for us, it's been a constant relearning process to like do an internal audit, see what your gaps are, see how you're showing up for the causes that you care about. And then my advice of sorts would be to reach out to the people that like know more than you. I do think there's a lot of things that young people have to say and causes that we care about. And we do our homework and we do our research, but at the same time, if you want to break the system, there's two ways of doing it. You either do it from the inside or you don't believe in the system at all. And I have a lot of qualms with capitalism, and there's a lot of moral friction and moral inconsistencies, but I do recognize that in the process of educating, I should be leaning on folks that know more than me, or at least understand the system better. So I want to underscore the importance of having those mentors and some of the privileges too, right? Whether it's like people who are willing to take that first chance and do our first contract that was like, I think a few $100s, if that. And it was with this really small record label. And we just told them what we thought about their marketing and what they should be doing for their next social media posts. So being able to have people that just wanted to take a chance on us was really, really important to our success, because then once we had that one positive like case study, we knew that we'd be able to just be compelling enough to actually grow the business and then do the hard work and hustle as much as we needed to, and to be at the place that we are today with 10 full-time folks, offices in Times Square before the pandemic, and now continuing to grow out not only our internal consultancy group, but also provide opportunities for other young people through our network of 3,000 young people that we do research with, and provide them with academic and professional opportunities as well to give back to the people that are now in places looking for jobs and looking for new work.
Great. And
I will attempt to, I'm learning and then taking all of that, what Shana just said, and like trying to insert that into I'm just learning so much from you, so I appreciate that. But building off of that, I'll echo some of what I said earlier, and speak to sort of how I got started with Listen Up. And it goes back to understanding your passion. Of course, as we're young, most of what we are interested in is our interests, hanging out, doing, all of our interests, and work and school comes secondary. And then as you get older, that's all sort of tends to flip. But when you're in that space and you're young enough to still have the time to really explore your interests, that's a great place to be. I think the best place to be is, of course, rent-free. You're a kid, you're living with your parents. Like, let's just call it for what it is. Like, you have this opportunity and you have this springboard, and this is the best time to really tap into what we were talking about earlier in terms of your passions, and see if your passion aligns with your values. Then the next step is really understanding if there's a gap in a market where that can fill a hole. And for me, I was really into hip hop and streetwear, which just naturally, since their inception, always fused together. Being Muslim, of course, like I grew up in, and before I was a teenager, of course, 9/11 and all the talks that we had to have. And my family, half of my family is Italian and Catholic, and the other half is Moroccan and Muslim. And so those conversations were like normal things to have for me. And I didn't necessarily understand that that wasn't normal for other people. I kind of thought everyone had that perspective. But when you actually show up for yourself and you are yourself, you understand that, oh, wait, this is a unique perspective or a unique experience I have. And so I'm able to infuse that into what I'm seeing. And so a lot of what I was taught when I was younger related to my Catholic and Muslim values, which at its core are actually very similar. Of course, the religions are different. But if you're taught a value system, it shapes how you think and how you think of work, how you think of schoolwork, how you think of what you want to be when you're older. And so if I was ever I always knew, as I told you, I wanted to run my own business because my parents inspired me. But I also knew from what my father told me, it doesn't matter what you do. He was never a parent who made me be a specific career or follow a specific trajectory. He always just told me, doesn't matter what you do, just make sure it benefits others. It's never about yourself. It's always about benefiting others, because you'll look back and you'll have wasted all of your time working, because living in this country, you spend most of your time working to be able to afford it. So don't look back and have that time wasted, if you're able to, of course. So growing up, I love streetwear. I noticed that a lot of it was rooted in, anti-establishment, but the other part was really rooted in misogyny, drugs, just clout chasing. And I realized there was a real gap for messaging on t-shirts, on hoodies, graphic tees that kids wanted to wear that could inspire others. What you're wearing is a walking billboard. So why are you promoting something that doesn't even align? Some of my favorite brands, I couldn't wear their t-shirts around my family. I couldn't even buy them. I would never put my dollars towards that, even though I respected what they were doing. So I found a clear gap where I could infuse my messaging, my values into what I was really passionate about. And I found, like Shayna said, people to look up to, my mentors. One of my mentors now, a really good friend, was my idol growing up. He had a t-shirt shop literally a block away from my high school. Every single day I would hang out there. I would just soak in all of his inspiration. And what he did was so unique and made me feel valued, even if I wasn't buying something. And I knew that I wanted to give that experience to others. And I wanted him to be my mentor so badly, but he always kept me at a distance and watched me. And I never asked him for anything. I only went to see his work. I made sure before I launched my business, I spent eight months when I was 15 learning how to start an LLC, how to do packaging, how to do shipping. Before I ever put this mission out into the world, before I ever printed a single thing, I knew exactly how to make my product and deliver it to the customer, and exactly how to do the ins and outs before ever launching it. And I never asked this future mentor a question until I knew I couldn't research it on my own. I couldn't find the answer on my own. I stalked his entire business from Google and YouTube and learned exactly how he did all of his things, reverse engineered everything without ever asking him anything. Those things are possible. And when you're looking for a mentor, which I'm sure is something that's going to come up in future responses, make sure you are never wasting their time and they know that you are dead serious about what you're doing, and you're never going to ask them a question that you can look up on your own. I think that that's really important when you're looking to learn from others. And then really just letting your work speak for itself. We want to start businesses. We want, our logo, our whatever it is to be out there, to be worn. But one thing I learned, and I really appreciate that I didn't do, was I never released a single item with my logo on it until 6 years later. I let every single piece exist in the world as its own message, as its own thing. Never came back to me except for the packaging. If someone was interested in the product and the message, they could find me. But I was never going to push something that people could. I built trust, and I built this thing where people knew they could look at me and say, oh, I'm going to get this from this brand. So that 5 years later, when I did release a logo piece, that logo meant something. That brand actually meant something. It wasn't just, hey, I have this name, I think it's cool, wear it on a t-shirt. I saw from then, maybe about 10 years ago, that we were moving to a culture, a community where we valued and trusted people more than brands. I grew up trusting brands. I grew up loving brands. And then I realized there was a shift, especially as social media really began taking over. People wanted to know the people behind the brands. And of course, Shayna has now taken that, and this new generation has really taken that. And they're 14 years old, and these boardrooms, like I'm good at, you take that, I'll focus on t-shirts, but like that's a real movement. You have to recognize the movements that are happening, because what you're seeing on your phone screen, what you're seeing on social media is last year's movement just coming to fruition today. You have to know what's coming next year, and you have to know where to look, and you have to really do your research. And so that's my advice for like negative starting place, -1 before you even reach step 1. That's like, I think that's like a mandatory. If inshallah someone who's going to be watching is going to be sitting on this panel in 5 years, they probably most likely will have had that trait.
You know, well, one thing, or a shared thread between between Shaina and Adam has been, you know, seek out a mentor. And when I think about having a coach or mentor, I'll recommend a book to anyone that's tuned in. It's called $1 Trillion Coach, the story of Bill Campbell. I won't delve too deep into it, but a great read outside of the panel. I guess just to bring something tangible to that, and anyone can open up and sort of share their thoughts. How do you go about finding, soliciting, procuring a mentor or a coach?
I want to take this one first, because I think I have a really interesting approach. Find out who's doing it the best. Don't reach out to them. Find out who they think is doing the best, who they look to. Find your inspiration, and that is where the gold will be, or the key will be. Yeah, I think it's really easy to find the person with the biggest numbers, the best position. They're the most busy. They're maybe, you know, that's not necessarily, you're in direct competition with them. Find out who they seek inspiration from. And if you're doing your research correctly, you'll know. You should know who they are looking into, or else you haven't really, this is intense, and like this is deeper, and like a lot deeper than people really want to go, but we're in such a crowded landscape. Like you have to go deeper, and you have to really, really understand what you're doing, because guess what? Everyone who didn't understand what they're doing, Juve is coming after them now. And this seriously, like they didn't really understand the full context of what they're doing. And that's why people are being called out now. You have to understand and have eyes. And of course, you're not going to be hawkish over everything, but just be well-rounded in what you're doing. And that includes who you're seeking out as a mentor, and understanding the circle that they surround themselves in, because that's the best way to cut through the noise. When you do finally reach that mentor and sit down with them, or have the opportunity, they'll be like, wow, I'm glad I didn't waste my time with this cup of coffee, for example.
Yeah. Go ahead, Anas.
So just springboarding on what Adam has said as well. I mean, I think for me, I'm a few years older than Shane and Adam. Love to be 25 again, but what I would say is, as I was coming up, I actually did not have any mentors, and a lot of it was because there was no representation as I was coming up. Even though there were out there people like Raj Manar, Tariq Farid, founder of Edible Arrangements, I didn't have access to them. The internet wasn't around, or any of that sort of stuff as I was coming up. But the way mentorship has worked for me, and it's funny, here on my desk, I actually have a note that was written to me by one of my mentors 7 years ago when I went to Cannes for the first time. And I keep it on my desk as a form of inspiration for me, because that was my first time at Cannes, south of France. This guy ultimately from the UK, suburbs of Chicago, to making it to Cannes. And the way my mentorship worked was he was actually my former boss, and it didn't start off for it to be a mentor relationship. It was just someone who I embodied as like who I respected as a person, for the embodiment as a person. He's a family guy, married, kids, had a great career, and he's holistic, and he's the nicest person ever. And I just want to learn from him. And I was fortunate that he was my boss, but every moment that I spent with him for those 6 years at Data Alliance, and he eventually was one who nominated me for CEO, I was just so enthralled by who he was as a person. And to Adam's point, it was this idea of wanting to we had core values that were the same. He had a very balanced lifestyle, and that's what I was in pursuit of as well. So it was very organic. But with that being said, I've had other types of mentors who I've spoke to probably half now in the last 10 years, one of them being, I would say, Farah Kutwari, from the CEO of Ethan Allen. He was the first person who I met when I was in my 20s who looked like me, who had actually had a C-suite job. And I was like, wait, representation does matter, because there's a guy who's got my sensibilities, And if he's there, and he probably had it way tougher than any of us do because he came into the market at a point in time that there was truly no representation. If he can do it, there's probably space for me as well. So I think there's that level of one-on-one connection where you can get, but you can find mentorship in people that you're around on a daily basis. So look for that, but make sure you have a question to ask. And you just don't want to take their time. You want to be very specific in what you want. But then also you can get inspiration from others around you who, even if they are not in touching distance, but they can be mentors just through the actions that they had, and use that to inspire yourself.
Yeah, very well said. I'll chime in with 2 examples here. In my past life in tech, I attended an event called Distill Your Data. It was at this restaurant, and the main sort of speaker there was Bill Schmarzo, who was this chief technology officer of Dell EMC at the time. And I started thinking, man, I really want to get to know Bill, like somehow, and I want him to be my mentor. And, how can I, like, between he and I are like 30 rows of seats, right? And so I stood outside of the restaurant pretending to tie my shoe for about 30 minutes. And I knew the door he was going to walk out of. It sounds stalkerish, but whatever. And
you do what it takes. You do what it takes. Respect.
And he's big on education, and I knew it. And I was just, starting grad school. And so I was like, this is the thread I'm going to start the conversation off of. He walked out. I shook his hand. I knew I had maybe 30 seconds before his driver was picking him up. And I just nailed it and said, here's my card. Do you mind if I reach out to you? I would love sort of to bridge a connection. And I didn't ask him then to be my coach or mentor, but that started a dialogue. He gave me his card. He said, email me. And, the next piece from there was, I sent him a few emails. And by the 3rd email, I said, I'm growing an industry. I'd love to learn from you. Would you be my coach? And, I was surprised. And later I found out, people want to be mentors, and they want to be coaches, and they want to give back. And he was like totally on board. And we met once a quarter, and he's still a great friend. And so anyone that's thinking about reaching out to a coach or mentor, it may be daunting. It may be like, as you mentioned, and I was like the CEO of Ethan Allen, these people seem unapproachable, but they're really not. And they want to help. That's my take on it. From there, Vakar and Anas, there's this concept of, and probably the worst transition in history, but sort of proactively making a pivot. Both of you have transitioned your careers when you were on the top of your previous industry. Could you speak to that concept and how people can emulate that?
Go for it, Nas.
Bakar, you want to go first? Oh, no, go ahead, Bakar. I just spoke.
Right.
We should switch up a bit.
So, to give everybody context of my pivot, right? I'm in the biotech world. I'm doing entrepreneurship side of things, and all of a sudden, I end up in law school. And it was very circumstantial, and it was all of the pieces that everyone on the panel are talking about coming together all at the right time. Proper mentorship, the people that are around me, pure grit as far as hard work. Law school is no joke. And when you've never taken any law class before, or, you deal with law, but you don't really know law until you step into a torts class, you're like, what is going on? You think you're an amazing writer until that law teacher is like, what did you just write? And, I'm coming from an Ivy League background. I think I'm the one, and I can be the one that the first in law school, but it gives you a whole new perspective. And really the pivot was me understanding the little bits that I was learning and the mentorship that was around me to tell me that, look, you're really good at figuring out the nuances that none of these researchers can figure out. There's a reason why this project keeps landing on your desk. There's a reason why when you're giving a quick lecture on the IRB and the research of the world, you happen to have lawyers and judges that are listening to you about the regulatory policy that they should shut up at the university. And because you don't have that background, you're not able to stand up and flex those credentials. And law school just happened to be one of those credentials that you needed to go get in order to make sure that you're effective and people listen to your advice, not just from your experience, but from your credentials, right? So the pivot for me was purely circumstantial. based on the data that I was getting, based on the work that I was getting, based on the things that I was good at, based on the things that were interesting to me, based on the things that I was reading at night and keeping me up. And majority of it was the mentors that were around me. I couldn't see what I was really good at, and I couldn't see at that time what was really going to be the path to success. So having those people around you that are really looking out for you, the appropriate person giving you advice and taking action on that, and literally resonating what everybody else was saying is why I made that pivot. So I recommend figuring out how you can take advice, internalize that advice, and finding a way to take action from that.
So just following up on what Vicar is saying as well, I think for me, every time I have transitioned, and this may sound super hokey, I have done a lot of dua. I have lived on a Janimaz and I've prayed for the next moment to happen. Like for real, like when I wanted to leave Chicago and go to New York, I mean, that wasn't a common thing. And at that point in time, I hadn't gone to a top 10 school or anything like that. So to get picked up by American Express, that was like winning the lotto. It was like Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness, that final scene of getting picked. And I honestly do believe divine intervention has a lot to do with it. And then even as I transitioned from American Express to WPP, I just knew internally I wasn't happy, and I knew internally I wanted more. So I prayed a lot. So I don't want anyone to discount that, because that's a real thing. But as I have transitioned, and I've never considered myself on top of my career ever, only because when you climb one mountain, you just see there's a million mountains in front of you. So top of your career, I'd like to be on top of my life and just be happy with what I have, and having that inner peace, because there's always more to gain materially. But in terms of those transitions, the way they've come, I think in context of this conversation, the last 3 positions I've had, they were all created for me. So my advice would be is you should reach out to people when you don't need them, because eventually there'll be time when you do need them. So the last 3 positions were all created for me. It was just through conversations, and they serendipitously happened. It wasn't something that I was looking for. Like even like the WPP role, it was created. The role at Kantar, it was created. The role at Stagwell, it was created. And I was always tapped on the shoulder from people that I knew from a past life to say, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? So those pivots just organically happened. And even as I came to Stagwell, ultimately our roots are being a private equity company, and my role was to come in and help the transformation to being a marketing and communications company. But so it's always being good to everyone. I think that goes a very long way. We are relationships based, and you don't only want to reach out when you want something. You should reach out when you don't, because people can sense that, and they can sense desperation. They can sense sincerity. And I mean, even Adam and I, we met at Cannes, was it last year or the year before? And it was very serendipitous.
I was going to tell
very, very serendipitous. We met at Cannes at a place that when he was supposed to be at, just randomly being there. But we've just stayed in touch because we stayed in touch. Humans, connection. So in terms of my transitions, it's just been by connection, just being cool with people, and that's how it's happened. It was nothing methodical about it, but just trying to be sincere and authentic and just be connected. That's it.
Yeah. I was going to say, honest, one more item that I think, I want to make sure that we keep in touch on is the connection portion of it that you mentioned. One quick, I don't want to say strategy or trick, but one quick is the reflection and being grateful and thankful for what other people are doing for you. That's the quickest and easiest way to connect. And it just puts that person on a pedestal. It makes them feel good. The response you get, it makes you feel amazing for being grateful for what it is. And if that's how we feel about, connecting on an interpersonal level and people-wise, imagine how much barakah we're getting for being grateful and being shukr for what Allah's giving us, right? And so Allah's the one that gives you in miles when we walk inches. And so you got to make sure you find a way to connect. The quickest way to do that is just genuinely saying thank you for what people have done for you. For you undergrads, look out for people that were in high school that helped you out. For you in middle school, look out for people that were in elementary school that helped you out. For us in early stage careers, we've got a lot of people that helped us out. And even late stage career, we've got a long list. And so everyone has a lot of people to thank. And of course, we've got the one to thank for everything.
No, it's really well said. Gratefulness is certainly, incredibly important. And, Anas, I think he has some technical issues. He'll be back, but he really also hit the nail on the head in proactively reaching out to folks when you don't need them. And we're in this distributed world all of a sudden. Everybody is remote, but we have levers we can pull on, like LinkedIn, like community groups, like this webinar. And I would encourage everyone who's interested to reach out to the panel here. And, I know we're all going to make ourselves available for networking. But a tangible example is I get, hit up on LinkedIn all of the time. Usually people trying to sell me something. But outside of that, it's a lot of times people will be very blunt and direct. And in the first sentence, they'll say, do you have a job opening? Do you have this? And it's a little bit off-putting, right? Like you wouldn't just randomly walk up to somebody on the street and say, hey, buy this or help me with this. You would, I think there's an aspect of being sincere even at a distance and bridging connections without, a want or a sort of a personal need to just learn from each other as well. I had the head of Optum Ventures reach out to me 3 weeks ago, and he said, hey, we're doing innovation stuff, you're doing innovation stuff, let's just chat. And we had a awesome 30-minute conversation, and we'll be friends. And maybe 2 years down the line, something comes up, I might have an opportunity for him or he for me, but, it was bridging a connection. So I would urge everyone, build a network, reach out to people proactively, and do it just to chat type of thing. It all starts with a conversation. So, another question I had for the group here is, there's this aspect of unemployment, and then there's this aspect of folks that are now just finishing their undergrad or finishing grad school, and they're looking for a job in the current market. And the current market is a bit turbulent. What advice would you give to folks that are recent graduates that are traversing this terrain of finding employment? And, should they go back to school as an example and learn more, or should they, I'll leave it open to the floor.
Maybe we should have our resident undergrad who's about to
Shaina,
get in there.
tell us, Shaina.
What are you doing to get yourself a job or creating your
She's
job?
already got one. June.
I was gonna say that I was like, I do not want to answer this question because who am I to be in undergrad, like 20 years old and telling people? But so I think there's a few things to this that I'll quickly jump in, and I'd love some of the more seasoned professionals to chime in. But when I got to Penn, like I knew I wanted to start something, and I was like, the best time to start something is an undergrad because it's low risk, right? Adam said this so well. Like my mom makes me food, brings it to my bed. I'm home right now, right? I don't have to do anything. I don't leave the bed and I get food, I get rent. I'm like, alhamdulillah, God is good when I'm home. So I know that I'm just chilling, right? And then when I go to school, same thing. Like I go to my classes, whatever. I also get to work. It's great. Like if I'm done, if I don't want to pay attention in Zoom, I can just like answer some client emails on the side. So I get the best of both worlds, and I have a security blanket and a security net. But there was definitely a moment for me that came down to. So at Penn, like obviously there's the Wharton School of Business, and there was a very pervasive culture of like this pipeline of finance and consulting. I didn't know who Goldman Sachs was. I never heard of her, but apparently everyone wanted to work at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or MBB and all the financial services and that sector. But I had no clue what it was. And my freshman year, I remember I would apply to like the diversity programs for these aforementioned places. Like and before that, I think I'm like very comfortable with rejection. So if I don't get something, like I'm like, oh, God didn't will it. Like it's very easy for me to just push past something if I don't get it because it just wasn't meant for me. So I remember applying to all these things, and then I had no interest in them. Like I do not care about global capital markets. I do not care what that means. But at the time, it was what everyone else was doing. So I assumed that that's what I had to do as well. Like if everyone at Penn wants to go and work in these places, then there must be a reason for it, right? And then I think it got to a point where like my sophomore year, like I was just sad. I was like, school sucks. Everything is fake. No one is in college to learn. Everyone just cares about having a good GPA and getting, securing the bag, getting a job. That's it. Like, no one actually cares about learning. I came to college thinking I'm going to have like 3 a.m. intellectual conversations with people. And instead people are staying up till 3 a.m. to apply to a bunch of like programs and make spreadsheets for them. So I felt a really high sense of apathy towards like college and like getting a job and career. And I was like, everything just works on, connections and privilege and these systems of power, which is, to be quite honest, even if from the answers that we've said, it is true. But I think pairing that with an understanding of like, I needed to live a fulfilled life. So when it came down to it, I think, at least in the college realm, I think the options that we see presented to us often fit into those molds of like, the elite rankings, or like what is it that people are most familiar with and what's like most well known sometimes, to me, if that makes sense. Because if you want financial security, obviously you're going to be attracted to a place that is already established. And I think for me, unraveling some of those like misconceptions that people have about the job landscape or like where opportunities exist was really important. Right now, like I'm working at Juve and I go to school, but I'm also doing like an internship at CARE. And the reason that I took that on was because I realized that as much as it is important to understand the things that you're good at, it's also important to recognize the things that you're not good at or the things that you want to learn. And I realized for me that this was a time that I wanted to actively listen and understand like how to engage even with the Muslim community and the communities that matter to me from people who understood them best. So I think it's a delicate balance of like when you're entering the job market, especially now, of firstly, like, what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I'm skilled at? What are the things that I know I'm not as strong at, but I do want to refine and learn more about? And then lastly, pairing that with an understanding of like, when you're creating your own opportunities, I mean, like, even if you're taking like consulting, maybe you love just this idea of like engaging, giving brands feedback. Like, is there a world where you can work in a really specific role with that? Healthcare consulting, healthcare management, maybe it's marketing, advertising, right? These are not professions that traditionally you will see people like myself or us, for example, in, right? So then if you're not represented there, but you have the skill set for it, how do you then go about creating the opportunity? And maybe it's just getting your foot in the door for the very first time, like getting that internship, reaching out to someone who, has that similar experience that you did, an alumni from your school, whatever it might be, right? I think it's important to keep in mind though, like how we create our own opportunities that exist outside of the echo chamber, outside of the places that we know and we're well versed with. Like, my mom would love for me to be a doctor. I'm not a doctor, but I have been able to create my own opportunity. So I'll leave on that note that I think right now, because of quarantine, because of COVID, we have this really unique opportunity of sorts to take that leap of faith and to kind of experiment and at least learn as much as you can about yourself and about the industries that you care about. Because we're not, I mean, inshallah, God willing, hopefully we won't be in the situation like this again. But if we are, like, how do we use that to our advantage when we can, recognizing the level of privilege that we also might have?
Shayna, there's just some gems in there that I wanted to underscore. The first of which was being okay with rejection. We're in this time where people are going to be applying for 50 jobs, 40, 30, whatever the number is. And, more often than not, rejection is a part of it. And to have that level of resilience for it, it to roll off your back like sweat and keep trucking and moving forward is incredibly important. In addition to, it seems like from everything I've heard you say, it's being an antagonist towards complacency. So it's, hey, I'm a student. I started Juve Consulting. I'm interning at CARE, but I'm not a doctor, which is okay. But all of those things are happening. And it's, always, I think that's, if I can give advice to everyone as well, it's like, there's always someone working harder than you. So make sure you're working as hard as you can and thinking outside of the box. And then the third part of what you really called out, Shayna, is like knowing yourself. And I think we can all take this moment in quarantine and being socially distanced to do some self-reflection and really get to know yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses. And your weaknesses are really just opportunities. From there, I'd love to, if anyone else wants to come in here for some advice around recent grads.
What I would say, and I'm going to preface this by saying I've come from a position in life where I've been both a have and a have not. Had the immigrant narrative, There was a point in time where we had no money. My mum would sew our teddy bears and our coats. My mum was widowed at 28 with 5 kids in the UK. So I've seen the pendulum of life, to having the fortitude to meet Adam at Cannes, right? So it's been the upsides. And so with that being said, the first piece, I think, as you're going to look for a new job, is your mindset in all of this. And I think Shaina just really touched upon it as well. What has worked for me, there was a point in time where I felt like there was a downswing in my career where I just wasn't happy with what I had. And what really helped me was literally the 5-minute journal. And there's actually a lot of Islamic principles in it around giving shukr, giving thanks, but for even the small things, to also giving intention, which is niyyah, right? That's a big thing in Islam as well. So just really just putting your thoughts and training your thoughts to think positively, because what you think will eventually become a reality. So I highly recommend everyone do the 5-minute journal. And then also, I know there's going to be a lot of people thinking about 40 million people are unemployed. Well, guess what? There's 3 times as many who are employed. So you can be one of those people. So just train your brain in that. But then the other piece of it around your expertise is draw the attention to you. Back to this idea of clients and so forth. You can go out and you can hunt for a job, and you should, but also know where you are. Do you need money? Do you have the luxury to be able to, take a passion project and so forth? But there are ways to draw employers to yourself as well. And that is by exhibiting your thought leadership. Like what I love about Juve is that they're very provocative and they're very real and they're very raw, even with Listen Up and, the word that Noor puts out through her podcast and so forth. It's all very real and very authentic, and it draws people to them. So use social media as your platform to attract people to you and jobs to you. But also on a very tactical level, as you're applying for a job online, realize that there is an algorithm in place that regardless of how good or bad you are, it's going to pick up on specific buzzwords. So just know that there's an algorithm that pretty much skip traces what the job description is to the resume that's out there. So if you want to be in that, just make sure there's a lot of those keywords from that job description that are also in your resume, because from an algorithm perspective, it's going to pick it up. So 3 things: it's your mindset, it's draw attention to yourself by your subject matter expertise, but very tactically, if you're going to apply online, go ahead and bring in those buzzwords into your resume, because it will, there's an algorithm at play as well.
Spot on. I'm not sure how much more we can add, except for the fact that I think when I'm looking at hiring somebody, I really want to see how they can help me solve my problems. So keep that in mind when you're talking to somebody. You really want to find a way to find out what the other person is dealing with, and your job literally is going to be to solve their problems. And we do the same thing every single day. No matter what your job description is, you're solving someone else's problem and you're getting paid to do it.
Yeah, I'll add just to tail on Anas's feedback on submitting a resume. If I draw on personal example, there was the last 3 jobs that I've worked were not from submitting an application online. It was literally someone I was connected with, specifically for the last one was on LinkedIn. And I was like, hey, I can see your team is growing, the work you're leading is compelling. Would you be open to formal introductions? And that's the starting point. And then you have a chat. And in that chat, there's either congruency where you can add value, and there's congruency in it being a right fit. And then they'll personally hand your resume to the hiring manager, the recruiter. And then you're automatically catapulted into the process instead of having to rely solely on the algorithm. But if you are going to apply online, I think having some mindfulness to that algorithm is incredibly important. Trucking along, Anas and Adam, Anas, you're a marketing exec. Adam, you're a marketing guru. How can folks think of themselves as their own brand, and how might they position their brand successfully? And then the final part of this question, if we dissect it into 3 parts, does it change from a marketing perspective if you're marketing internally, for example, if you're already in an organization, versus externally if you're not in that organization, type of thing?
Adam, are you going to go?
Sure, I'll go. I'll start on marketing yourself, like as your own brand. Am I correct in the question? I think, sorry. I think one thing that's really important is definitely leaning into your identity. But I think for marketing specifically, one thing that we're doing, the work that we're doing with Noor, of course, she's a journalist, produces documentaries and podcasts, but we do a lot of consulting with brands and marketing specifically, because especially today, brands have to become, and back to what Shana was saying about just knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you can lean into, what you need help. In terms of marketing, one reason people choose our company, which is called At Your Service, and a reason people choose Noor for brand consulting and things like that is because we are taking a journalist's approach to marketing. And all that means is when we focus on story, which is what marketing is, it's about telling a story and connecting with the community. When we do focus on community, when we do focus on story, we're doing it how a journalist should do it, which is building trust with the community, building trust with an audience, finding out what they want, what they're asking for, and not telling them what they need, depending on your industry, of course. And I think that happens on an individual level as yourself. I think being known for something, being known for, again, what you're good at, building trust with others. And that goes back to what I was saying about Listen Up and how people were gravitating toward Listen Up because it was myself and my friends showing people we were the ones behind this. We were the ones, our intention, we were broadcasting our intention, we were broadcasting our mission, and everything like that. And so we were able to build trust so that when I pivot and I start a new line, or I pivot and I become a talent manager, people understand what to expect from me. And I think consistency is really important. Of course, I'm still young, but I think the most important thing is consistency. And I consider all of my work successful. Of course, I have an idea of what ultimate success looks like and how to get there. But what Enes was saying about that mountain always getting higher and just enjoying being on the mountain. I'm literally just moved into a mountain home and I'm enjoying being on the mountain. But I drove by home the other day and I was like, damn, that view is nice. I'm chilling on my mountain. Right. And I'm going to be consistent and really build this place. And my foundation, of course, we're talking about marketing yourself, really build on your foundation while everyone is out here doing all different things. And it's so enticing. And I can do 1,000 things. I have done 1,000 things, but I need to do 3 right now. And I need to put the blinders on and I need to, not isolate yourself, but just understand when to say no, how to say no, and when to pitch yourself. And I can provide value to you in this way because I notice that you're doing this and this is what I can provide. So it comes down to building trust, especially with the community or your community.
So I'm picking up what you're putting down, Adam, totally. And I also feel like Shina should be part of this conversation because Juve is connecting with brands in such a different way. And as one of the advisors for Juve, that's what I love the most. So I think you've definitely got a perspective on this and would love to hear it as well, Shina. But I think for me, when I think ultimately your brand is your reputation, right? It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And for me, the way I've been able to build that, throughout my career, I've been a collaborator and I've always been very true to myself. Even when I started off at TransUnion, we didn't have a room to pray in. I went to HR. I was like, we need a room to pray in. I've just always I don't know how to be anyone else but me. So I've just been true to myself and just continue to plug away. But with that, I've also been known as a hard worker. So my job at TransUnion, I started off as a data engineer. I did not even though I got a degree in information systems, I did not remember how to program because I had a year off. And so I would go in on weekends, and I worked during 2008, 2009 during the financial services crisis, the housing market collapse. And that's actually when I excelled. So I would say in terms of your brand, what people need to realize is your brand, your reputation. You are interviewing every day, even when you have a job, because you're interviewing with your colleagues, because you never know where your colleagues are going to go. They're always going to have a perception of you. So don't discount your colleagues because they are future employers of future colleagues, because they will also tap you on the shoulder. And the other piece of it is in this world that we're living in today, a lot of folks are speaking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am right now the only person of color in the C-suite at my firm. And it's great to be at the table, but it's also hard because when people bring you in, your perspective can be different versus the other 9 people. So you will feel like you're swimming upstream. So in terms of building your brand, you've got to speak openly and you've got to be consistent. But it's almost like what Ruth Bader Ginsburg said: when you do disagree, you want to disagree in a way that everyone's in it with you. So be okay to disagreeing, but you need to know when and how to disagree so that people are more so they feel included in the conversation rather than isolated. And then my final piece in terms of building your brand is you want to be sure that you are consistent in what you're putting out. Because there are times which I've seen from our colleagues, their perspectives on who they are has completely changed. So in terms of a brand, like any product, like your iPhone, like Nike, like whatever, like Reebok, whatever it might be, make sure you're just consistent so that when people need to connect with you, they know what they're getting. So those are just pieces that I've applied to myself. And once again, I've always been a collaborator and I've always reached out to people. Even the way Shine and I are talking is through June, and we had a side conversation. We just got along really well, and here we are. So it's just focus on things you're good at and just be honest, but don't be afraid to share yourself either through social media, because that's a big part of brand building.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to rebuild off of that, build on top of your building. In terms of the collaboration, I think thinking more broadly about collaboration and the direct impact that collaborating with an individual can have. If you think about collaborating on a brand level, you're able to tap into that brand's audience and that brand's network. So when you're thinking individually, don't think about what NS can provide for me as a collaborator, but what experience, background, network, every single thing that he has is not what I have, or is different, can complement that. And so just thinking more than one-dimensionally about collaboration and about your network. And I'll pass that.
Yeah, I think, it's very well said by both you, Adam, and Anas. And I think
I think Shine had a thought. Is there? Apologies. I think Shine had a quick thought.
Oh no, please.
No, you're so good. I think Anas and Adam have done like an exceptional job of like making really salient points. The only thing that I think I was going to add on was kind of taking the 2 parts about identity that Adam mentioned and consistency that both Anas and Adam mentioned, and saying that like there's like when you're thinking about a product or like Apple or like any of like I'm using Apple as an example as like a brand that's like in terms of consistency like very clearly, like my 4-year-old brother can tell you what the logo is, what the colors are, etc. Right? And how that I think manifests for individuals is like also understanding like almost like omni-channel distribution, not to be like a total marketer.
Oh, that's it.
But to say that what for myself as an individual, right, what I'm putting on Instagram, like I understand my audience there very specifically, right? Whether it's like talking about, there's a lot of conversations around performative activism and things of that nature, but the content that I'm putting out is always authentic to my beliefs. So on Instagram, I might be posting something different than what I'm posting on LinkedIn versus what I'm putting on Twitter, etc. But all of that to say, firstly, we're living in a data age. Any employer can go back, look at what you're posting, what you're saying, but I don't have any qualms with what I'm saying out there because I truly believe it. And if an employer does not want to engage with me, right, because of the content I said or put out, because it's too controversial or political, that doesn't matter to me because I'm still staying true and authentic to what I believe. And secondly, when you're understanding your audience, it's important to then cater your content to them. So on LinkedIn, like there's a lot of young people that their posts get thousands of likes on it. And it's literally just them recounting their experiences in the job or in a job or in the workplace. But they do it in a way that's very much so synonymous to who they are. Like no one else could replicate that post and only you could do that. And I think balancing authenticity with an understanding of like your unique value proposition or your unique views is something that social media can really effectively leverage because no one else can say your story. I think Adam said that so well. Like instead of saying your marketing, it's like I'm being a storyteller and I'm telling you what I believe and how I believe it and how it manifests for me from my workplace to my home to the education space. So I think it's really important to be mindful of how we choose to reflect that given different access to different platforms and the use of that specific platform as well.
That's really well said. I think authenticity is incredibly important. And I think being disingenuous, I think people can smell that from a mile away, right? You see this, I call it leadership theater where folks like just say these buzzwords to sort of portray themselves as a leader. And then you skin back the onion a bit and you're like, well, that's, great lipstick you put on type of thing. The other thing, Anas, that you called out really well was your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I have an employee that works for me, and she's absolutely brilliant. But what I love about her as an employee and as, you know, a designer and everything else that she is I'll ask her for a simple task and she'll come back with having done that plus 5. And it's consistent in her constantly doing that. And I always think, you know, if I leave my current post, I'm going to leave, I'm going to try to take her with me type of thing. I shouldn't say that out loud, but
unless you have a non-compete or whatever, but yeah.
yeah, but and I have people in my past life like that as well, where when I'm hiring, I reach out to them first because they had that type of work ethic. They were humble. They delivered consistently and well. And if you don't, people will remember it as well. So, you know, I love that. We'll probably do 2 more questions here. So anyone that's tuned in, feel free to start filling up the Q&A in the comment section, and we're going to field some Q&A here in about a short 10 minutes. Leading into that, a lot of comments were about, hey, be really good at your craft and be the best at what you do. A question I had is, you know, how do you identify, or what steps can you take to find out what you're good at? And then how can you create value from realizing what you're good at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that because I think a lot of the, let's say technical, right? Engineers, scientists, researchers, the individuals that are zoned in on their particular subject are not able to see the interpersonal skills that they have or the soft skills that they need to develop or they currently have. And so really understanding the people, coming back to the same individuals, right? The people that are around you, they're going to be the ones that are going to be honest, right? Your siblings are probably going to be the most honest with you because they're going to just let you have it. The people that actually care about you will tell you what it is that you're doing wrong. You know, you have this in the business world, you've got this 360 evaluation that you can do where your subordinates are evaluating you and your leadership is evaluating you. That's a really good way of finding out, but it's not easy to figure out what you're good at. Most of the time it's compliments that you're getting, consistent compliments that you're getting, and it's as simple as, do I work hard at the end of the day? Am I exhausted because I've wanted to do 1, 2, 3, 4 and I've literally given it all? And let's be honest, we all know when we're, you know, spending half the time than what we need to, just sending that email just in time so that your manager isn't going to call you out on it. Hey, just wanted to let you know we've got 3 or 4 things going on. I know it was due at noon, but you'll get it sometime soon. You say soon instead of 5 p.m. so that you don't set yourself a deadline, right? So we know when we're doing that, and that's when you're not being honest with yourself. So number one, you've got to be honest with yourself if you really want to find out what you're good at. Number 2, you've got to have those internal conversations that Adam and Anas have been talking about. And number 3, it's just pure hard work. There is no easy answer. You've got to sit down, do the work, whether it's memorizing in school or just straight up learning new skills so that you can provide value for your employer.
I would also say there's a difference between what you're good at and what you love. So there is a distinction. Like, I loved acting, but I was terrible. You know, I was really, I mean, I'm keeping it real, right? But I was actually really good in financial services, but I wasn't necessarily thrilled in it. And I was, part of me had to come to it, I was like, I'm brown, that's what I'm supposed to do. I think it's finding, and I think Adam had spoke about this, finding the intersection of your purpose and what you love to how can you ultimately monetize those two things. And that is, to Vikar's point, that is the toughest intersection to come to. And when people can do it, I think that's when they're truly successful because it doesn't feel like work. For me, what I love doing, it's not even a role, it's an ideology. Like, I do love marketing and communications. I love being able to inspire. Like, my big plan in life is to write a novel that becomes a movie and I live off the royalties of that. That's my BHAG, my big hairy audacious goal. Am I a good writer? Don't know, never sold a word in my life, but that is what I love doing. So until I get to that, I got my day job, but I enjoy, like, through the work that I do, through collaborating, I get to meet cool people like Shaina and Adam and so forth. So it's finding enough of what you love in what you do, even if it's not the ultimate, but there has to be enough love in there to keep you going.
Yeah, I think it also builds off of knowing yourself. And I think, for example, I always wanted to work in marketing. I went to the top business school because I wanted to do marketing. But I realized that, like, when you're marketing, I don't want to do all of the marketing. Like, I don't want to do every single task within marketing, right? So that's like a very general, very broad. Yeah. But within marketing, I loved since I was in high school, I knew that any job I wanted to create work where people stopped and it made them think, or they really appreciated it, but it didn't have my name on it. And so that led me to marketing. And so that made me say, I want to be in marketing, right? But as I was applying and not getting certain opportunities, or not really understanding if these were right for me, I had to think, what about marketing do I like? Like, it's not just marketing. Like, okay, so let's say I have a project. What part of this project do I want to be responsible for? Yeah. Have I done this before? Am I good at this? So then I can then take that, and I'm not even working in marketing now, but I'm able to do what I said I wanted to do, which is create work that other people love, but I'm not front facing, and I just put it out into the world, and I'm able to take that principle and apply it to other industries that might not be marketing, and find that little gem. I can find that in any industry and be happy with what I'm doing throughout the day. And of course, like Anna said, there's a difference between what you love and what you're good at. Sometimes they intersect, sometimes they don't. Sometimes what you love has to remain a hobby for your entire life. And sometimes you have to work a job in an industry that you don't necessarily love, but within that, you can find those places where you fit and can really provide value. And I think the best value you can provide is when you're actually excited about the work you're doing.
Yeah, very, very well said. As we think about parting shots and any sort of advice or last comments you would want to leave before we hop into Q&A, I'd love to open it up for each of us to go through and send out some parting shots. And maybe we start with Vicar.
Parting shots. Everybody's consistently been saying it. Stay true to yourself. Make sure you recognize who's around you. You've got to internalize that and just work hard.
Shaina?
Sorry, I was being technologically inept. My quick TLDR would be, like there's like a hadith, I believe, that says like 1 hour of reflection is better than 1,000 nights of prayer. I'm not saying only reflect, don't pray. No way am I endorsing that. But what I would say is, like to do both, right? Like especially in the times that we're living in, I think a lot of us have already alluded to this, being able to reflect, go back and whatever gives you the inner sujood, like that inner peace, think about that and make that your cornerstone and like lean in, because right now we've been given this opportunity, from God's graces. So I recognize your privilege, recognize where you are today and like what things are important to you, but also take the time to reflect as well.
And Adam.
I have two. One is save your money, and the second is timing is everything. The first one is very specific. There's this artist that I liked growing up. His name is Vic Mensa. He had a rap group called Save Money. I never heard a rapper tell me to save money then spend money. But I took that, and for real, like that mentor that I spoke of earlier with the t-shirts, part of his keynote that I went to 3 times and memorized his keynote was the story where he would save all of his money when his friends were out Friday night, Saturday night, Thursday night, spending on whatever they're spending on. He was saving that money, putting it into whatever he was working on, whether it was his hobby or his job, and using that to better himself. Of course, if you are in a position, listen, I have your fun, but if you're in a position where you're like, I really want to do something, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, but I want to learn this craft, save some change. And every paycheck you get, put $10, put whatever, like any extra money you get, put it towards your passion. The second is timing is everything. Goes back to the dua and the istikhara prayer. Like istikhara is like coffee every day. Like for real, be great. Were you grateful? Are you grateful today for what you asked for last year? Because it's a rotating door. But timing is everything. I met Enes because I found someone from SAP on LinkedIn who was speaking at Cannes, and I pitched Nora as a journalist to speak there. We got there, they paid for our flights, we got all the way there. I went to a party someone invited us to because we built trust with them. The person outside of the hotel who was working, we just talked to them because no one was talking to them. She said, hey, there's a party on the roof. You're not really allowed in, but go check it out. First person I meet at that party is Enes, and talk about like representation and like at Cannes in the advertising industry, the first person to meet at a party you're not allowed to be at being Enes, and now we're here and I've been fortunate enough for him to be a mentor and I can just shoot him any questions, but timing, and we've worked together and he is the reason I'm here. Timing is everything. Shaina said if she doesn't get an opportunity, it's not meant for her. Totally true. And just know that like you are exactly where you're meant to be. If that opportunity missed you because you were a second late, or you got the opportunity because you were second early, you were meant to be in that window every single moment, every single opportunity. And sometimes you're working on something that isn't ready right now. COVID happened. You know how many projects people are working on and timing wasn't right? I was supposed to launch a brand during this time. Timing just isn't right. But inshallah, when I launch, it'll be even better than the hurt of like not being able to do it. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, the timing thing is so true, because the other end of that story that Adam just said is there's a lady by the name of Nadine Dietz, who's the founder of CMO Moves for Adweek. She had asked us to walk her over to this event that I wasn't invited to either, and I ended up going just because I walked her over with my colleague Mandy Rico, who Adam knows as well, and that's how we ended up being there. But what's funny is I saw Noor and Adam's note on Instagram saying, hey, we're going to be at Cannes, reach out to us. And in my head, I was like, I'm going to reach out to them, but I never did. And the fact that we ended up connecting anyways, alhamdulillah, it goes back to this idea of manifestation. So in terms of my TLDR or my parting words, it would definitely be, the 5-minute journal. I live by it. Everyone go buy a copy. I'm not getting paid to say that. I just love the book because it has changed my life. And also the simple piece is just be good to one another. Pay it forward, help people out. Don't always do something for gain return. There is gain in just being good to people and seeing other people's happiness. And that's it.
Really well said. And, I'll just add a few comments here. First, to anyone that's tuned in that is going through a tough time with their employment, you're not alone. There's a massive community, Muslim community across the nation and the world, and especially in Houston. And ISGH is doing incredible things in terms like this event and this webinar series for engagement, in addition to having networking tools and the ISGH networking funnel to help with things like resume building, with LinkedIn review, with ESL, and job placement. So pull on these levers and understand that in times that are dark, it does feel like you are all alone, but you do have this massive community, and we're all here, should be, and we are here for one another. Another thing that has been sort of resonated throughout this conversation is, being grateful. Remember those that have helped you and pass it on. Remember those that prayed for you, like your mothers. And
yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's incredibly important. And people ask me like, hey, user, your career pivoted and you went from here to there, and sort of things happen quickly as well. And I honestly feel like, and it sounds kumbaya-ish, but it's all because of how much my mom prays for me. It's massive, and I'm blessed, and I don't forget it. And and the final thing I'll say here is Vakar and I, the first Jummah I went to after COVID was with Vakar, and there was this, hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He said, take advantage of 5 things before 5: your youth before your old age, your health before your illness, your riches before your poverty, your free time before you're busy, and your life before your death. And it's incredibly important to, I think, have that lens. So with that, I'd love to sort of kick it off to Q&A, and we'll start with Karen Outlaw, who's asking, I would like to know more about Shaina's organization. How do you spell it?
That's a great question. So it's Juve, J-U-V Consulting, but do not call it J-U-V Consulting. It's pronounced Juve, but I completely understand if it's confusing. So yes, we're getting a new website soon, but our website is up, juveconsulting.com. Go follow us, go like, go subscribe. We're everywhere, Juve Consulting. But yeah, it's called Juve Consulting.
Can you add some color on what Juve does?
Of course. So I can give you the quick pitch because now I know it like the back of my hand. So Juve Consulting, as I mentioned previously, is a Generation Z marketing consultancy. Anas is on our board of advisors. So thank you to him for being one of the people that we can rely on for support and advice. But essentially what we do is we basically help Fortune 500 companies, brands, nonprofits, startups, any of our clients to authentically engage with Generation Z. And what that really looks like is anything from literally taking a strategy call and hopping on the phone with them and ideating with them or giving them feedback to actual research. We have a network of over 3,000 young people where we disseminate surveys with qualitative and quantitative insights or actual implementation. So everything from TikTok to a presentation, anything that actually means like tangibly creating something for a brand or a company manifests through our implementation services. And it's completely Gen Z led. We have one person who's 34 years old. He has a child, so it's a lot of pressure to him. But other than that, the company is completely led by young people. And my job literally sometimes feels fake to me because I just get to talk about the things I care about. So it's a true privilege to be able to do that. And I'm very grateful to be where I am. So that's Juve.
Shaina, early 30s is still young. I only have 7 gray hairs. I can't.
I don't want to think about the fact that I'm going to be 21 in a few months. Like, I don't want to think about it.
Another question we have here is any advice on working with recruiters?
Oh gosh, let me take that one. So, I mean, recruiters, I'm going to liken them to like my acting agents because it works in the same way. You've got to always send out your headshot. You've always got to stay top of mind. You've always got to do stuff that's compelling. Like, you know, I mean, I think recruiters are there to fill positions, but, you know, I think it's about developing a relationship with the recruiters because the name of the game is stay on top of their mind, be very specific for what is it that you're looking for, especially in this arena. There's going to be so many people looking for roles, and it's not always the best candidate getting the role. It's the candidate who gets there first. So you got to get there first by having a good relationship. So that's where I would start in terms of recruiters. But I would also say don't hitch all your hopes to a recruiter either, because sometimes they just disappear without any feedback or any advice or anything to that nature. In life, I think most people end up disappointed because their expectations are unaligned. So in terms of your expectation alignment with the recruiter, don't see them as a mentor or a counselor. They're doing a job. They get comped based on the position that they fill. You just want to be top of mind and you want to present yourself as the best candidate for them to be successful. That would be my advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. Vakar or Adam, do you want to add anything there?
That's spot on. I mean,
you know, another question we have here is, could you please share thoughts on how to fill in gaps in resume? And I'm assuming that means having time off between employment or having a gap in your employment history. How can you justify that or make it not an eyesore?
Yeah, I'll give that question to a few of y'all, but you got to be honest with what you were doing on that time. If you're on maternity leave, write that down. If you're traveling internationally, taking care of family stuff, gotta find a way to express that. But honesty is the key for me.
I have, just before Ines goes, sorry, a mentor of mine recently posted, he's hiring, he's a CMO, and he was saying after this, whenever COVID and whatever that means, but I will be looking at resumes of people who are listing things that they were helping the world and not necessarily career oriented. And so that might be an interesting perspective if you're doing anything during this time, especially to be helping others or contributing to your community. Just so you know, there are CMOs of really large companies who are looking at that specifically. So to alleviate some of the pressure.
Yeah, it's a great point to fill in or avoid gaps. It's, you know, you can volunteer, you can work on a startup type of thing. You can, there's so many things that you can do. And then also, I think I just cut you off as you're about to say something.
No, I think Vikar and Adam said it best, so I have nothing more to add. Straight up.
All right, so let's see. I'm just gonna put some glasses on so I can read this.
I have a question. How does one get a bookcase like NS?
Hey, can I get one, please?
Yeah.
More like I get glasses like was there.
Yeah. All right. So Asam Nasser is asking, if we wanted to reach out or seek out mentoring, can we do it on LinkedIn? After this program, ISGH is going to send out an email with ways to get in touch with us. Some are through email directly, some are through LinkedIn. And we're all definitely open to networking and making ourselves available. Here we go. So Sana Aziz is asking, what is one key takeaway you would give to someone who is just now starting their career in the corporate world, but wants to launch their own business someday?
I would take Adam's advice: save your money. That's the big thing. Save your money and learn as much as you can, and go live your dream. But I think saving money is key. But also realize that the job that you have, there's probably transferable skills to lead into your business as well. And I'm sure, Shaina, you've got some thoughts on that as well. But that's how I would look at it. But also, like the tough part, so on the side, I've bought and sold real estate and so forth. I've always had a tough part with balance. So as you've got that goal of launching your business, just to be disciplined on the timeline and how you're going to do it, because balancing out being good at your career, because as you're just starting out, you have to be good at your career while also insulating your future dream as well.
Yeah, time management is incredibly important. When I was finishing out my master's in Cambridge, one of the things for me was the things I was learning in school, as an example, were highly relevant to what we were doing at work. And there were programs we launched at work that I can directly attribute to like professors, these brilliant ideas, and I brought them to the workplace. So so many things you're learning. You're learning about the industry that you're in. You're learning about program management, probably project management. You're learning about stakeholder management and how to build relationships, and really think through how you can take those things and transfer them into what you're starting as well. And there's industry-specific knowledge you're building as well, right? Like there's so many examples of folks, I'm in healthcare, that are in healthcare working for a payer or a provider or a large health system or a tech insurer or whatever, and they're building something simultaneously from what they're learning. Zoom is a great example of that. Those are Cisco guys, right? Who started it. Take what you're learning and build off of it.
Yeah, I think also just understanding the corporate employee dynamic and relationship, and to be frank, use them before they use you. And sort of coming from a grim place, but in a take that and make it nicer. That's just what I had off the top of my head to say. But all that to say, if you're someone who's similar to me, I was applying for marketing jobs that I really wanted in the music industry. My dad was like, "No, you're not working in the music industry." God was like, "No, you're not working in the music industry." I was applying for jobs that would have highlighted my strengths, and I'm very creative and visual oriented and all that. So I was applying for those kinds of jobs where I would be leading direction, which was something I always wanted to do. But God blessed me with an opportunity still in marketing for a company in a position where I still needed to learn. I needed to learn a lot about SEO, search engine optimization, for my job, for my career, and I wasn't very good at it. And this job came across, and it was for SEO. It wasn't something that I was super passionate about, but it was something that I knew if I had a goal of running my own business, I can contribute very well to this organization, wholeheartedly contribute, but also extract value and learn. If you are in my opinion, if you're in a place where you think you're going to leave and start something of your own, find out how much you can learn from your company, from your position specifically that you can take. And if there's mobility within your company to either pivot or shift kind of what you're working on. But look, at the end of the day, you're there because you provide value. You provide value to the team more in terms of moral, but also a financial value. And the second you don't, you're gone. And so use that dynamic. Always think that, look, we were just about to lock in a really great consulting opportunity, and they took all of our ideas and took all of our calls and everything. And then at the last moment, they gave it to someone else after we had laid everything out. And I didn't remember my own lesson, which was don't use them before they use you. And you're still learning it. You'll always learn it. But it's just, you'll get burned along the way. But if you can use that and frame it in a way where you're not vicious or malicious, but you're just serving yourself and your purpose in a way that's authentic to you and your values, learn as much as you can. Because when you're out there on your own, no one's doing anything for you for free unless you're paying them. And it's a lot harder to call in those favors. And anyone who's an entrepreneur knows that struggle. So just use it as an education. Get paid to learn.
Yep. Another question here is, any good books you recommend around topics discussed? I'll start off with that, as Anas is pulling from the shelf behind him. For me, it's $1 Trillion Coach, the story of Bill Campbell. If you go in the Kindle bookstore, or if you step into a Barnes & Noble, there's this whole section on self-help, but there's no real content around how to help other people. And so $1 Trillion Coach is just that, and it's amazing. And I also just finished the McKinsey Edge, which is very tactful, just good advice on how to manage your life.
Mine is Great Windows by Adam Grant. Specifically for one core lesson in here, something I learned was this concept of horizontal hostility. And assuming we are all Muslim here or familiar with that space, there's a lot of horizontal hostility in our community. And really what that is hostility towards someone who should and does have the same values as you. So you'll see Muslims roasting each other online, Muslim women going at each other, Muslim men going at each other. And you see this in every community, of course. I'm focusing specifically on ours. This happens with vegans and vegetarians. Literally, he breaks it all down. And just understanding that is always going to play out, that people who you think are aligned with you, as you continue making moves and doing all these things, there will be that hostility, but you have to find those gems within that. And, it's easy there was this movement when I was growing up called unmasked. It's easy to, disassociate yourself from a community that's been hostile towards you. But you really have to understand that there's a handful of gems everywhere you go that you can really learn from. And that really changed my perspective on just what we're trying to do, especially if you're breaking barriers in an industry and culture and in a public facing space. So I learned a lot of great things from this book.
And Anas, you were showing one as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the growth mindset ultimately. This book has been super helpful in terms of just helping people get to their full potential. And I'm a huge believer in what you think is what becomes your reality, and it all starts with that. And interestingly enough, it's rooted quite a bit in Islamic principles and values. So I really like it. I like that book, and also, well, there's two others. This was a really good book, especially in the world that Adam and I and Shaina live in, because you've got to be able to influence people. And overall, Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. Brilliant book, just gives you advice about life. So I'd say those are three books that have really shaped my way of thinking.
Shaina?
Yes, I would second Anas's Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. Great book. My recommendation would be first Confidence it's written by Tom Kelly and the founders of the design school at Stanford. I'm personally really interested in human-centered design, so I'm a bit biased, but it basically, the basic premise of the book is this idea of creatives not just being people who do art and people who are engaged in what we seem to be creative implements or creative industries, but actually how all of us are able to be creatives within our selves and within industries. And the second book that I've just finished it, was How to Win Cosmic War by Reza Aslan. That's not necessarily, I guess, about business per se, but I think for the Muslim community, it's important for us to also understand the context and the history of our community, right? To Adam's point, not only about our interactions with folks, but understanding your history, how this country was built, right? African Muslim slaves we're a part of the foundation of the United States fabric. So I think it's important to underscore that and like understand what's happening geopolitically as well. So I think the book does a really good job of putting into context, you know, like what does it mean to like for jihad in the 21st century, or you know, Israel-Palestine, all these really complicated issues. Or he does a really good job, I think, of presenting a theoretical framework around them. So those would be my 2 recommendations.
Yeah, really good recommendations. I think the one my wife picked this one up. Let me see if I can. Right, Shama'il of Muhammadiyah. This is Imam Tirmidhi's one, right? So it's basic hadiths of how the Prophet was, his behaviors, his looks. So the entire continuous chain of things that we probably didn't know about, or at least I didn't. And recently, you know, once you start to realize, you know, you've got Adam Grant's book and you've got all these self-help books, you start to realize that you've got a lot of these key ingredients. For some reason, it's not clicking in. And usually that's because you've got some cracks in your foundation. So if you can go back to your roots, identify what that foundational mistake that you're making, going back to what the Prophet was teaching us and consistently was being taught to us, and we just weren't paying attention, or at least I wasn't paying attention. If you can zone in on that, or at least give some thought to that, that would be great.
Yeah, very well said. You know, as we wrap up here, I want to take a moment to thank, first of all, ISGH for allowing us and giving us a platform to have this discussion. You know, for context purposes, the way this was all born is, you know, I was launching a behavioral health program amidst a pandemic, and I was really seeing like, geez, unemployment is harsh right now. You know, in Houston, it was like 14% in March. In Boston or Massachusetts, it was greater than 20%. And I sent a cold email to info@ISGH. So for everyone, they do check their email. And that email was, hey, I have this idea for a program to engage the community. And the president of ISGH emailed me back. And he said, let's do this, right? So you have the largest Islamic society in North America that engaged and listening to the community. So, you know, amazing. And I don't know who knows, or if you guys know Soma Saeed, who's who runs programs for ISGH. Find her, give her a hug. She put in tireless effort around setting this all up and, you know, securing sponsorship for a giveaway. And just, you know, thank you, Soma, and thank you, ISGH. I also want to take a moment to thank the panel, Shaina, Vakar, Anas, Adam. Thank you so much. We had some technical difficulties with Naman. He wasn't able to join. He's here in spirit. Miriam had a family issue, and we sorely missed her. You know, her feedback would have been great, but you know, both Naman and Miriam are still open for mentorship and resume review after this session as a part of the giveaway. And so just to sort of bring everyone back in and talk about the fun stuff now, which is the giveaway. And leading into that, I want to thank Oh My God Burger, or OMG Burger, yeah, and Lesbella for their very generous donation of gift cards and meals. In addition, we have a few $25 gift cards we're giving out, and then each of us, so Anas, Adam, Vakar, Shaina, Uzair, Numan, and Miriam are offering their time either through resume review, mentorship, etc. And we're going to reach out to these winners. I just wanted to name them out loud. We have Maha Tariq, Halima Rahman, Kainat Mohar. And if I'm saying these names incorrectly, please forgive me. Humara Aziz, Mujahid Siddiq, Sana Aziz, Mavish Hassan, Zaman Azhar, Ahmed Abbasi, Abdul Hanan, Rabia Ahmed, Jasra, Yunus Latif, Atik Dara, Muhammad Isa, and Professor Dr. Saudul Hassan. So you're all winners, and we'll get an email shortly after this with your prize, either a form of a gift card to one of these restaurants, or in cash, or mentorship and resume review, or etc. So thank you everyone for joining. With that, it is the weekend. Try to enjoy it. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.